Okay, so this is probably going to be the last video I make about that dodgy suitcase that I found in Hawkshaw, near Bury, in December 2018. The reason for this one is I've been clearing out my parents' loft, or attic if you're American, at the moment due to an imminent house move, relocation, and I came across a huge box of books, one of which was this. And those of you that watch my last video will recognise this as the book that I took from that suitcase. Good Friday by Linda LaPlante, sorry. I'd actually recommend it if you're into reading. It's especially if you're into plot twists. This has got yeah, it's a very twisty plot. Especially if you can get it cheap on somewhere like eBay or Amazon second hand, it's really good. Now, there's not too much wrong with the book really, except there's obvious water damage. I don't know if you can see the state of it up here. It's quite dark, so there's staining in, but it's not showing up too well. But there's, you know, when the pages go a little bit crispy, there's obvious rain damage, but it's still very readable. Just look at the text. It's definitely readable, and I'm glad I took it really. And like I said in my last video, it was quite clearly abandoned. No one was coming back for that stuff. I mean, there was wood lice crawling all over it. It had clearly been there for some time. Yeah, clearly abandoned. The only notable things in it are you've got that HAK again, which was also on the orange ring binder in the suitcase. So I don't know if that's someone's initials or name maybe. And then on one of the pages, near the start, I did separate the pages as I read it, but some of them here seem to have somehow stuck back together, probably due to the water damage. Just separate them again. Let's separate it again now. And then somewhere near the start, if you just let me find the page, I think it was 16. Yeah, page 16. This is a really way to mark what page you're up to. They must have not read much either, if they only read 16 pages. But you've got this kind of... I don't know what that is. If anyone could help me out and tell me what that is, I'd appreciate it. It's almost like an upside down semicolon. I don't know if that's maybe an I or some sort of foreign Arabic perhaps symbol. And then also page 16 is circled, which I guess is just because they didn't have a bookmark. And then finally, somewhere near the back, where was it? There was a little note also in a foreign language. There. Sorry about that. Here, on page 172. Again, you've got the page marked in the same way. This time with a vertical line through it, which is a bit weird. And down at the bottom, you've got some sort of foreign note. If anyone speaks whatever language that is and can help me out and tell me what that means, I'd be grateful, because I'm obviously quite interested. Okay, that's really it for that book. Kind of, after seeing these notes, I'm kind of a bit annoyed with myself that I didn't take that other book about Palestine. Even though I probably wouldn't have read that one, to be honest. So to round up, why am I so angry at the way Greater Manchester Police treated me over reporting that suitcase? Well, it's just the way the officer was shown such serious... You know, I showed her the full videos, and there was things in it. if I go through the items in there, okay, the Revels packet, that's just the Revels packet. There's not much you can take away from that. It could have blown into the suitcase or anything. The bag, there's not too much you can take away from that. I have done a little bit of research, as much as I can do, and I went onto the website on that bag, internationale.com, and it can be one of two things really. There was a women's, according to Wikipedia, there was a women's clothing retailer with that name in the UK, but they ceased to exist around 4 or 5 years ago, if I remember rightly. So that would have to be someone that keeps their carrier bags for a very long time. And then the other option is that website now links to an Arab makeup website. So the website name, if you put in internationale.com into your browser, it will redirect you to, I think it's like A13bmakeup.com. So I guess like a number plate style, they're making the 13 into some sort of R, so it would read arabmakeup.com. And if that's where the bags come from, it suggests that it's someone that either buys stuff from abroad or has been out the country. I think it's probably more likely to be the first option, and it's just someone's carrier bag that's been lying around in the UK for a while, to be honest. But it does seem a coincidence that that website now links to an Arab website, and all the contents of the suitcase is in what looks like Arabic. So you can't take too much away from the bag. But then, if you look at things like the photographs, now the photographs were, okay, just photographs. And, oh, I've lost my light. I'll carry on anyway. I know in many cultures outside the UK, people walking down the street with a gun is not normal, but just you see it a lot more in those countries. But for someone to have pictures of two people holding guns, you have to kind of question that. It just doesn't sit right with me. And then, was it the other photograph or that one? I can't remember. Now this is the biggest. I can't remember exactly what the PCSO said to me, but it was something like, well, I don't know how common these surnames are. It wasn't that, but it was something like that, you know what I mean? So, if you look at the 3 names on the back of one of the photographs, if you go back to my first video and pause it, you'll see there's Abu Bakr, Al Gamodi, and Abedi. Now, for anyone that lives in the UK, or especially in Greater Manchester, when you hear the surname Abedi, unless you've been living for the past few years with your head in the sand, you think straight away of the Manchester bombing. And that, from this whole experience, that is the most shocking thing to me. And then, it's not just that, it's the fact this suitcase was blue. The videos that I showed this police officer clearly show this suitcase was blue. And this is what I meant when I said in my last video, Greater Manchester, I don't know if they found it, maybe they found it, maybe that was it and they went and got it when I reported it. Who knows? But, so, this PCSO has a blue suitcase reported to her. What? Was it less than a year? Okay, over a year, like a year and a half maybe, after the Manchester bombing. And it's not automatically triggered in her head, oh, this could be suspicious. She instead goes down the route of, oh, well, this guy's obviously some sort of racist or probably in the EDL or something, you know what I mean? Like, okay, the orange folder, you start with, what was it, some sort of Arabic stuff at the start, or whatever language. I think it's probably Arabic, it looks like Arabic. And that's, I don't know what that is. But then you flip over and you get things like, what was it? A guide to, is it Pariah? And then stuff about martyrdom. And this is getting, you're thinking this person must be quite a orthodox Muslim. But then you turn the page and you get, what was it? Manchester Gay Pride 2016. And I know you should be as open-minded as you can be. And I've seen articles in the press recently about like Muslim gay pride events in London. But if you look at the top of this gay pride map, of which they've traced the route in red pen and put a circle around a specific area. I don't know, let's be open-minded. Like the officer said, maybe that's where they plan to stand on that day and watch the parade. But, you know what I mean? Like, it's worrying that the police would think like this to me. And you look at the top of that page, and it's not just they've put some sort of, did they underline gay or something? I can't remember exactly, but there was definitely something suspicious about that page, that they'd edited it in some way. Basically, like condemning homosexuality. This text at the top of the page that's about what was it? The punishment that gays get. And then at the bottom of the page, you've got the gay pride route. So how is that not suspicious? Like, surely I don't have to explicitly say to an officer why that is suspicious. Are they that? Like, it's like having to spell out basic words for them if that's the case, like cat and dog. The Palestine book, that could be innocuous. It's I mean, yeah, there's nothing there really. Unless there was anything inside it, I don't know, because I didn't really look in that one. And then this one, I don't know what it's all in Arabic or whatever, so I don't know about that one either. If anyone could help me out with what either the text in the orange folder is, or the text in this. Okay, so you've got this blue suitcase, and I looked at the CCTV pictures that the GMP released at the of Salman Abedi. And it was very similar from what I remember. It was quite a distinctive lining as well. I'd love to see, I don't know, did Greater Manchester Police ever release images of the interior of the case? Because I've tried to find some, and I can't find any anywhere, but I'd love to see the interior of the case. It's quite distinctive, really. So I'll leave it there for now. Also, that visit that I got the day after was definitely not normal police. I forgot about that. So, in my last video, I said I found this suitcase on the Sunday. Is it the 9th of December, I think? I might be wrong, I think it was the 9th of December. It was the Sunday. Then on the next day, the Monday, I reported it to this PCSO. And then Okay, so the end of my video stopped recording for some reason last night, so it's the next morning. I'm quickly just gonna remake it. So when it stopped recording, the point I was in the middle of making was, in my over a quarter century of life so far, I've had maybe a handful of involvements with the police in any capacity. 3, I think. So for me to find that suitcase on a Sunday, report it on the next day on a Monday, and get not just a visit from police the next day, but a visit from plainclothes officers with a warrant card, but with no grounds they could properly explain to me before thorough questioning about my identity. It would be just an enormous coincidence. So for this reason, I've looked deeper into the likelihood of Greater Manchester Police telling the truth about that visit concerning their claimed identity issue. One of the things they said during that visit was that it's probably just a case of someone with exactly the same name and exactly the same date of birth also living in Greater Manchester, which can happen quite frequently, I've found out. Okay, so fair enough, with this in mind, I engaged the services of a professional that specialises in areas such as probate, ancestry, genealogy, wills, and I asked this professional to investigate the following 2 questions. So, number 1, what personal information about the general public do officers, specifically police officers in Greater Manchester Police, have available for identification purposes prior to conducting a home visit? And then question number 2, would it be likely or possible that my identity, and gave them my first name, middle name, last name, date of birth, would it be likely or possible that my identity could have been confused with that of another person by police based on my name and date of birth being similar or identical to that of another person? And this is the response. So, okay, we've got a greeting, a thank you, etc. And then we got this. So through a search of one or more of the following registers: birth register, marriage register, death register, parish register, civil partnership register, Thomas Qu'ran register, adoption register, stillbirth register, parental order register, abandoned children register, presumptive death register, and finally the gender recognition register, we have determined the following information regarding your queries. The number of persons named, and then it's got my first name Timothy, my middle name, and my last name Frost. So the number of persons named, first name, middle name, last name, with any date of birth that existed at any point, including pre-birth/stillborn in England or Wales since 1981, is 1. Furthermore, by negating knowledge of any provided middle names above to broaden the search to just Timothy Frost, so my first name and last name only, we have determined that the number of persons that has existed at any point, including pre-birth/stillborn in England or Wales since 1981, with date of birth, and then it's got my date of birth, is 1. The closest matching individual to the person identified above has multiple differences in parameters, namely date of birth and middle names. The differences between these persons would be available through a search of the Police National Computer, should records exist there, or if not, through a search of event databases above and/or the electoral register. Because the person identified presents multiple differences with their closest match, particularly date of birth difference, but also a middle name difference, it should not routinely be the case that any police identity query would arise for reasons of sameness / identifying parameter multiplicity. Identification targeted questioning by police is commonplace in the UK, normally for differentiation of persons of the same first name, last name, and date of birth. However, in your case, there are no close matches to your name and date of birth search parameters, so narrow into further commonly used parameters such as HMG NI number or mother's maiden name is unnecessary. And then they sign off. Hope this helps. Best wishes, name. So for me, this just adds more substance to my thoughts that visit must have been about the suitcase that I found the previous day. And with this in mind, that I'm the only person that exists or has existed in England or Wales with my name and my date of birth, I'm going to be asking Greater Manchester Police formally for an explanation, a written explanation of how the identity issue arose and kind of what exactly it was. And if they kind of don't give me a satisfactory response, I'm just going to go to the IPCC, and I don't feel that they will. So it's probably going to go to the IPCC, I guess. So, in my estimation, someone at GMP, whether it's that PCSO or more likely that PCSO's senior, etc., has clocked on what I may have reported. And again, I can't stress enough, to be clear, I'm saying may have reported. Obviously, I don't know for sure whether that bomber's suitcase was the suitcase I found. And I don't know, I'm kind of 50-50, I just don't know. But what I am saying is, and even if I did think it was that, with 100% certainty, I wouldn't want to make that claim about something on YouTube. But I just don't know. So, but what I am certain of is it was definitely blue. And although it was damaged, but you could still tell it was kind of a brush metal effect blue plastic. And all I can say, it was blue, and it was very similar to the suitcase released in those CCTV stills by GMP. And therefore, on those grounds alone, surely warranted further investigation. And I can't help but think that if the majority of people had been presented with that suitcase, they would have agreed with me regarding that, and not the police. So, I think at some point between the morning of the 10th of December 2018 and the evening of the 11th, a conversation, or maybe multiple conversations, have been had somewhere in some GMP building, and finally it's trickled through to someone with some common sense that's clicked on, oh, it's a report of an abandoned suitcase and it's blue. And this is probably without knowing that it contained Islamic related items. This was probably without knowing that there was a folder in there with what could have been described as, you could describe it at best as a very unusual mix of stuff, and at worst as something way more sinister. And what would that over PC tell me? Probably something like, oh, it probably belonged to a gay Muslim that had an innocent interest in weaponry collections, or I don't know. But I mean, she didn't say that. I'm just kind of surmising her overall disposition. Like, it was totally, just showed absolute disregard. And then we've not even yet considered the most shocking, biggest red flag, in my opinion, which was the name Abedi, clearly written on the back of one of the photographs I showed you in the video. And her attitude was just like, well, I don't know how common those surnames are. Again, she didn't say that, I'm not quoting her, but you know what I mean. That was kind of her overall attitude. And it's just absolutely unbelievable that anybody at all, let alone a police employee, would disregard any one of these things in isolation, to me. Let alone the totality of everything in that whole suitcase as not suspicious. And I really couldn't have done much more, to be honest. I described it to them, to her. The inside of it, the outside of it, the contents, told them the exact location of it. Told her exactly how I'd found it, its condition, gave the manufacturer name. And you've got to think, this wasn't just descriptions. I didn't walk into the police station with word of mouth alone. I'd taken videos of it and I was showing them to her. It's just mad. Yeah, mind-blowing. So if you ever want to believe that Greater Manchester Police are in the main straight and truthful, they're not. Just consider the bizarre response to that event. I mean, potentially for someone at GMP to say, I don't know, like, right, Ploddy, you go to that location he told you and get the suitcase. and you go and get as much of his life history and personal details as you can, but don't tell him why you're there. As if I wouldn't work out why they're there for myself. I mean, I'd just like to think a more respectable police decision would have been to say something like, okay, we've potentially made an error here. Let's go and see if there is a suitcase where he said, get it. Then apologise to this guy and talk to him about what he said he's found. Get those videos off him and see if there's any kind of links of significance or, you know, intelligence, whatever they normally start their investigation with. I mean, for a start, there's a massive fingerprint in mud or chocolate or shit or whatever it is in that book that I showed in my last video. It's the most dismissive situation by far that I've ever been in. It was like an aristocrat talking to how you'd expect them to talk to a snotty aristocrat talking to a homeless person. That's how she made me feel. Right, I'll leave it there. Oh, one more thing actually. So, isn't it funny how Greater Manchester Police were so quickly able to find my address in order to visit me the next day on some computer database or register or roll somewhere? So with this in mind, I'd like them to confirm exactly what resource or database they got that address from, because I would put money on whatever resource they got that name, my name and my address from, in order to visit me the next day, also had my date of birth on. Which, if is the case, would confirm they were lying about there being any identity issue at all. Because as I've just read out, I've engaged services that have confirmed to me that no one has existed in England or Wales with the same name and date of birth as me. So, if they've gone onto some computer system somewhere, and I'd like to tell them, I'm going to be requesting formally what that is that they've got my address and date and name and address from. Because if they've gone onto whatever that is and seen my date of birth, that proves, or pretty much proves, that there was no identity issue. There's no one else, as I've just read out above. So what's probably going to happen now is I'm going to put in a request to GMP asking them for the name of that resource, database, whatever it was, wherever they obtained my name and address from for the purposes of conducting that visit on the 11th of December 2018. And whether said resource holds my date of birth. And if I am correct about my prediction that it does, then I'll happily be corrected and pointed in the direction of some obscure resource that only has your name and address on. But if it does have my date of birth on, yeah, it pretty much proves there was no identity issue, and it was made up in order to get all my personal details, like show them my passport and etc. So what they're now gonna do is tell me they don't know where they got my address from, because telling me would prove they could see my date of birth. Or they'll look for some sort of obscure database or system that holds names and addresses but not dates of birth. I doubt such a thing exists, but like I said, I stand to be corrected. And if they can tell me that, I'll believe that's where they got it from.